What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday, an interesting interview popped up online that caused quite the conversation. This had to do with Nikkei and the president of Nintendo, Mr. Furukawa, talking about the future of Switch hardware and if we could be seeing a new system sometime soon. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Microsoft introducing a new subscription service for Game Pass and doing a bit of a trial run that should make it overall cheaper for households of gamers. And we're also going to be talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 as we got our first look at sales numbers coming out of Japan. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with the Xbox Series S, which has been kind of a mixed bag when it comes to developers. Some have said that it's frustrating to develop for, and we see that at times in the results with some games performing pretty poorly, and then other times you'll see developers get like full 4K out of the system. Well, it looks like Microsoft has heard some of those concerns. We can see this posted up by The Verge, where they say Microsoft is giving Xbox Series S game developers more control over memory on the console. A new Xbox software development kit has been released to developers recently. This from Microsoft's game dev team video saying hundreds of additional megabytes of memory are now available to Xbox Series S developers. This gives developers more control over memory, which can improve graphics performance in memory-constrained conditions. Obviously, this only benefits Xbox Series S owners, and I'm curious to see maybe some of the comparisons that Digital Foundry could run with here if there is a game that was performing very poorly and the developer goes back and I guess patches it or reworks some of it with this new update in mind. But I mean, the Xbox Series S, I feel like most people buy it realizing that it's like the budget option, and most are okay with like 1080p at 60 FPS. There is an interesting push though to go for 1440p or 4K, and at times even using ray tracing. But I'm curious to see if this update has any noticeable improvements. Also, we've been talking about this Tactics Ogre Reborn saga for a while now, but finally, it's been announced. We have an entire trailer here to take a look at, and this game is coming out November 11th. It is indeed titled Tactics Ogre Reborn. It's coming to the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC via Steam. Also, get this. There will be a physical edition for the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch. Of course, when PC through Steam, it'll be digital only, but that's exciting stuff that we'll be able to buy a physical copy of Tactics Ogre Reborn. I think it was like $50 on the Square Enix store. But either way, they have some features here, beautifully remastered graphics, which the filter they're using is definitely like a smoothing filter. I'm curious if we'll be able to turn that off or not, but fully voiced cutscenes, English and Japanese, full orchestral re-recording of the game's soundtrack, redesigned battle system, adjusted level management system, reworked AI, simplified and improved UI. This is awesome stuff to see here. And obviously, if you're a collector for Switch or PlayStation or anything, you're going to want to get your order in for this. I know we'll talk about pre-ordering games and being kind of unnecessary, more on the digital side. On something like this, where it appears like Square is even handling the distribution on their website, you may want to look into that. But exciting stuff. We'll be seeing Tactics Ogre Reborn this November. Oh, and whenever Koch Media comes up for whatever reason, people tend to look at the logo and try to figure out how to pronounce it. Is it Koch Media? Is it Koch Media? Koch Media? Well, they must have heard, because they decided to rebrand, and you can see it here, the logo. Pretty straightforward as to how to pronounce that one, right? It's P-L-A-I-O-N. Okay, I'll help you out. It's Play On, which for what they want people to view them as, which is more of an entertainment company as opposed to being like a distribution company, makes sense. They have kind of the little play button there, and they say that they want it to be evident that they are a film and gaming entertainment company first and foremost. So there we have it. We can put the Koch Media pronunciation to rest. Play On. That's what they're going to be known as going forward as part of Embracer Group. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and some interesting comments from the president, Mr. Furukawa, around the idea of a new Switch in the near future. This all started on Twitter after a Nikkei article was posted up. We can see this from Takashi Machizuki, who has really been following this entire saga of a Switch Pro or a 4K Switch or what have you, right? They say, Nikkei, there will be no new Nintendo hardware this fiscal year, which ends in March 2023. Not immediately clear whether that part of the article is from Nikkei's own reporting or what Nintendo president who Nikkei interviewed for the story said. So it's kind of strange, I guess, the way that this article is written up. And you'd have to translate it or whatever here, but we did have David Gibson, who chimed in the replies here, saying, article quotes Nintendo CEO. These are directly from Mr. Furukawa, saying normally it would stockpile inventory in the summer to be ready for the end of the year, when it is at its peak. This summer, we have not been able to produce as much as in previous years. Goes on to say, even if we can produce the volume we want, I'm not optimistic that we will be able to sell it all. Guidance, of course, calls for the sale of 18 million Switch systems in the next 9 years. Now, Nintendo hasn't been shy at saying, hey, we're going through an issue when it comes to supply chain constraints, and being able to find parts at reasonable prices just to build Switch systems hasn't been easy. But something to keep in mind, looking back over the last several years, is, cover basically every quarter from Nintendo as they released financials. The Switch has been kind of trending downwards for a couple of years now, and if their forecast holds up, about 18 million more in the next 9 months, it'll be another technically down year for the Switch from the year prior. And again, I know people will talk about supply constraints and all of that, and I kind of think Nintendo is using that a little bit here to explain away really what's been kind of a decline in demand for the Switch system itself. I think the better explanation is they're just running out of people to sell the system to. If they continue this forecast, as I believe they will, and I think they're going to hit it at the end of March 2023, that's what, 128 million Switch systems. That is a lot. That is like right behind they're getting close to the PS2 and the DS at that point, right? They'll have easily overtaken everything else then, and yeah, you're going to be seeing less and less people who even need to buy a Switch unless, you have some other new piece of hardware, whether it's the next generation or something that would be able to replace the current Switch like Nintendo did with the 3DS to the new 3DS. Now, part of the article that seems to be Nikkei saying that there wouldn't be new Switch hardware by the end of March 2023 does read like it's their speculation just based on the fact that Nintendo is trying to procure parts to hit that current forecast for the Switch. But it is interesting that Mr. Furukawa says, well, even if we could create more systems, I don't necessarily know if we'd be able to sell them all. That is signaling them understanding that, demand is falling for the current Switch. And I'm reminded of the many times that Mr. Furukawa has talked about the Wii generation and how they handled that so poorly. I look back on that and I think they should have done a Wii HD, and I feel like they look back and realize they should have as well. And then the Wii U didn't have to come out when it did. It could have waited a bit longer, and they could have extended that Wii generation a bit, having an HDMI port on there. But it was Nintendo being stubborn, and to be honest, they kind of paid for it with the next generation for the Wii U. And that's now the question I have for many of you. If you were Nintendo now and you're watching the decline in demand for the Switch, do you wait it out a bit longer until it's like really low? Or do you try to capitalize on what's been a very popular concept with the Switch, and you release something before momentum has completely bottomed out to try to catch it some and continue on maybe for another 3 or 4 years even, if you have a system like a Switch 4K that's able to really replace the current Switch over time? I'm kind of looking at this and thinking maybe next year they try for just some sort of revision with the Switch, and then they move to a next generation device years later. Might not even be a Switch replacement. Might not even be a hybrid system. We don't know how Nintendo operates here, but if I'm just going from complete business sense, you might want to think about that if you yourself are forecasting a downtrend for your overall system. But let me know what you would do if you were Nintendo. Next up, let's talk about a new Game Pass subscription model that Microsoft is doing a trial run for. And this is going to play more into the idea of like a family plan for Game Pass, right? And we see that like with Nintendo, they have their own like family plan for the Switch online service where you pay an amount and you could have like 8 people on there or something, right? Well, with Microsoft, it looks like they're going to have 4 people on Game Pass Ultimate. We can see this was released over on news.xbox.com. Xbox insiders in Colombia and Ireland can preview a new Game Pass offer starting today. Now, people have done some napkin math on this, and it appears that it would be $25 a month. And that would be up to 4 people. So obviously Microsoft's like, well, maybe a household needs it and they just have 3 people they would put on there and they would technically get more per person. But I mean, $25 divided by 4 people, just thinking about you filling up the overall allotment there, that's just over $6 per person for Game Pass. They do say this makes it even easier to play the best Game Pass games with friends and family across console, PC, and cloud by enabling you to add up to 4 people to your subscription, all with their own unique access to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate Games content and benefits. That's very interesting though. Everyone just has unique access. So let's say you and 3 other friends, maybe 2 of you are on PC and the other 2 are on Xbox. Hey, maybe somebody's just cloud gaming on their phone. You could all just kind of get thrown into a bucket and somebody pays the $25 per month. It's something that a lot of people do for Nintendo Switch Online because that ends up coming out to be really cheap. But this is a really good deal overall. I know that's what Microsoft's trying to play into now more than ever, just to continue boosting the Game Pass subscription number. We've heard that many of the executives at Microsoft now, some of their bonuses are tied to Game Pass and all these things. So they're going to keep coming up with ways to get more people on board. So in this instance, the head count, I can only assume, would increase because they would count all 4 people part of that membership. It's not just one membership, it's 4 people who have Game Pass technically, right? So you kind of bundle that together and they can work to blow up the number even more. But I'm not complaining, and I'm hoping this is something that works out here during this trial run and they then expand it beyond that. Obviously, they want to have it in select markets rather than just throw it everywhere all at once, kind of to see, I assume, how it will be received, if people will take advantage of it in good ways, obviously, by using it, and then bad ways, maybe trying to game the system a bit here and seeing if they can close out any loopholes before they roll it out to places like the US. But looking at this, I hope they have plans for that here pretty soon because that's a good deal. Next up, let's talk about Ubisoft and how acquisitions continue to come up, right? And what's one company in gaming that many people have looked at and said, I wonder if Microsoft or Sony are going to be buying them. Well, that's Ubisoft, right? And Ubisoft is interesting right now because they do appear to be in a position of weakness currently. They've been canceling projects, delaying stuff, and it just seems like they're struggling to find their footing now with these live service games that they just keep chasing. Well, now it looks like we at least have one interested party in having more ownership of Ubisoft, and that's Tencent. Yeah, we can see this over on Reuters. This was an exclusive saying China's largest social network and gaming firm, which bought a 5% stake in Ubisoft in 2018, has reached out to the French firm's founding Guillemot family and expressed interest in increasing its stake in the firm. The sources have said this is interesting. You're gonna want to keep an eye on this to see how it turns out, because it looks like Tencent is offering quite a bit per share. That's over $101 per share, which is up quite a bit from where it currently stands. So Tencent, I mean, really wants a piece of Ubisoft, more so than they have now, obviously. And according to one of the people, this from Reuters, Tencent is very determined to nail down the deal as Ubisoft is such an important strategic asset for Tencent. It's interesting. Again, they're offering 100 euros per share. That'd be a premium of 127% to the stock's 44 euros average price over the past 3 months. So I'm wondering, Tencent's interesting because they have invested and bought shares and ownership of all kinds of companies in gaming now, but they don't necessarily do much to call the shots or try to influence or do anything there. Obviously, they are trying to invest in companies more or less for a return overall over the long run. And with Ubisoft, if you have Microsoft or Sony looking around them, Tencent may want to increase their claim to make it less interesting to Microsoft or Sony to come in and buy them, because Tencent doesn't want to lose ownership of Ubisoft. I don't know if I would look at this as them doing a hostile takeover, but I also wouldn't necessarily count it out. It's definitely something to keep an eye on here because they're reaching out to Ubisoft Doesn't mean this has happened or anything, but based on where Ubisoft is now, I don't necessarily think they're going to turn down money, especially with the development of some of these bigger properties like Avatar and so on. So we'll see if we get any more information out of what's a pretty big offer from Tencent now to Ubisoft. In our last bit of news, let's talk about sales numbers out of Japan, as we now have our first look at how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 did in its debut week. We can head over here. This starting with the top 10 for games. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 on the Switch, 112,728 copies. Again, this is all physical, over-the-counter sales, does not count digital. If we are operating under the assumption that it's 50-50, there you go, add another 112,000 or so onto the top there. But that does beat out Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which came in just over 97,000 copies. The thing with that, though, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 came out less than a year after the Switch release. So the install size now for the Switch is significantly higher in Japan. I'll admit, I was kind of expecting more from Xenoblade Chronicles 3 here. Again, at least it was able to beat out 2, because if it didn't, that would have been, I would say, eyebrow-raising, definitely. But again, we don't have any indication on digital sales, so we'll find out more about that, I'm sure, from Nintendo at some point. At the very least, we'll find out what that be in November or so when they do their following fiscal quarter report. Then we have Digimon Survive at 228,536, which is absolutely shocking considering Bandai Namco just seemed to forget that this game came out. I will point out, though, no PS4 version in the top 10 at all, just the Switch. So, there's Bandai Namco's marketing. Nintendo Switch Sports is there at 24,966. Then we have Monster Hunter Rise, Sunbreak Set, Live Alive, which dropped 80%. Yeah, that kind of hurts a bit. Down to 14,098. Gran Turismo 7, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Then we have Tengoku Struggle, 10,912. And then Minecraft for the Switch. Moving over to the hardware, the Nintendo Switch at the top, 73,238. Interestingly enough, the PS5, 39,336. Massive jump there for the PS5. I assume more stock coming in here. In fact, I would only assume that if they had enough stock to send to Japan, it would probably take the top spot in the chart over the Switch at this point, because there were, Gran Turismo 7 was number 6 in the top 10, and that was kind of it. So it wasn't like any big new software or anything that was pushing the PS5 along. Then we have the Xbox Series at 8,988, the 3DS at 87, and then somebody found 14 PS4s in the back. But overall, I'd say an alright debut for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in Japan. It wasn't anything like explosive in terms of growth, but it did beat out Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I think it will become the best-selling Xenoblade game ever, obviously. From what we've seen just in these different sales charts, it appears like it's trending that way. It's also at the top of the eShop, which we've talked about the digital to physical split and how it seems to be leaning more and more towards digital. I'm just going to assume that there are quite a few digital sales in Japan here, maybe even more so than the physical sales at the top, considering the special edition wasn't there at launch. But Digimon Survive not even being in the top 10 for the PS4, whew, that's the real tragedy. Bandai Namco really just kind of set that thing out to die. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, how do you feel about the graphics for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? 11% say it looks great. 64% are right there in the middle. I think they look good enough. And then 25% say, I think the visuals look bad. Game Freak can do better. Sean was telling me about how it looks like a HD 3DS game. I think it looks a little better than that, but I'll admit it's not mind-blowing or anything. To me anyway, as long as the visuals don't get in the way, I just kind of go, well, it's Pokemon. Sure, it's worth a ton of money. It's like with the most valuable intellectual property in the world, but also, it's Game Freak. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Guy saying, the fact that every time these Pokemon Presents happens, there's always one or two of the designs goes viral, show they really have the actual creature designing thing down very well. Really a picture of one of them with just the caption, this, got over 150,000 likes on Twitter. That's the one thing I'll give him credit. It's probably very difficult to come up with Pokemon design, after decades now. And what I think with Scarlet and Violet, are they going to hit the 1,000 Pokemon mark, or they'll be very close to it? Coming up with 1,000 different designs for these made-up creatures that, you have to try to get creative every single time, come up with different types that mash together. And then They have to work across all different forms of entertainment, whether it's trading cards, anime, manga, figures, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, that's hard. So while I'll make fun of Game Freak and the Pokemon Company for the visuals in their games, I gotta give them credit. They have come up with a lot of unique designs, we'll say, for the different Pokemon, even after almost 1,000 of them. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was the Nintendo Switch and the back half of its life. How would you approach this from a hardware standpoint if you were Nintendo? And then also, what about that Xbox Game Pass family plan? Does that sound like something you would be interested in? And then Xenoblade Chronicles 3 with its initial sales out of Japan beating out Xenoblade 2. How far do you think this series can go when it comes to the latest entry in sales? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.